Okay, bringing to you another Friday show. I am coming to kick some more narratives in the teeth, and I wanted to discuss the financial goings on insofar as Comrade Xi's little anti corruption campaign and how it's targeted small Chinese banks to weaponize them, consolidate his power, and hurt the West via harming their investors and Western banks that are tied into these small financial institutions of China. And while he's doing this, he is claiming the whole way that he is targeting financial misdeeds and improprieties. I'm also going to discuss more in detail the whole Taiwan issue, and I'm also going to discuss the future invasion of the USA in detail, much like I sometimes do. I'm going to explain why this bimbo puppet that they're talking about installing really doesn't matter, and it doesn't mean anything because it's not going to really change the overall overarching agendas of the different elites, neither the Western elites nor the Eastern elites, such as who rules China and Russia. I'm going to explain one second, hold on. Oh, I'm going to talk about some issues as far as like perspectives go on China and more, and I'm going to talk about the alleged Chinese bumper crop. Yeah. I've heard some murmurings about this past week, and I wanted to go into a little more on that. Now, the Russian bumper crop has actually been, it's been, what's the word? It's been solidified. I'll just say it's been proven that they have in fact had a bumper crop, and it has been largely harvested and put away, and that as far as the Chinese go, I'm not so sure about it, but I'm inclined to believe that they perhaps maybe have had some sort of a bumper harvest, but again, I'm not so sure about them. Whereas the Russians, that's been backed up. That's been proven to be true. And I'm going to talk about the Chinese, seizing, leadership in basically all areas of major, I guess you could say, topics insofar as on the world stage is concerned. They have, by real numbers, have in fact been the real world superpower for at least the past 5 years. And that's been proven by just the numbers and as far as the facts, figures, data points, and more are concerned. Now, it took them a while getting there, as I've explained before so many different times. So hold on a second. It's distracting me. I'm trying to show my cat on the camera, so there was something in the background to watch, but it's distracting to me. Basically, I'm just going to put it like this. There had been a lot of reports as far as the whole entire situation goes as it relates to China and the goings-on the ground there. Now, you have to remember that they actually had a similar situation arise when they were weaponizing trade against the West. And Shanghai, as I've reported before, is their primary trading port with the West, with both the EU and with North America. So when they did their CONVID's security theater as an excuse for them to uh, wage a trade war against the West and deprive the West of their goods and components for goods and other products, while at the same time taking in what they needed from the West, as I've reported before, all the food hoarding that they've done in China. So even if the bumper harvest thing is in fact not true, or it's a inflated story, what is true is they have hoarded all the food. And if you want to learn more about that, I've covered all the numbers on that in prior lives. I'm not going to go into all that again. I have a whole treasure trove of lives full of information about that if you all are interested. So please go back and watch that. Yes, so I'm going to discuss how they're doing the same thing with this financial war that's going on, with this trade war that's going on. Now, what they've done, we know what they've done with trade, but with finances, how they're doing it is that Xi has his little anti-corruption campaign that is there to clean up a lot of a lot of Chinese institutions, and he has done that, and he has put China on the path. This has been going on for some years now. It's not a new thing. For China to have become the world superpower, they did have to clean up a lot of corruption there. And they did that. And it all started in the 90s, and they've gradually built themselves up industrially, economically, and militarily. And they have turned their military from just a regular, decent power military into a world-class superpower military based upon their anti-corruption campaigns, for one. That's not to say that, there's still not going to be corruption. I mean, every military has corruption, okay? I can tell you this because, okay, in our military, in better times, when we had a better military, a less depleted military, a more professional military, guess what? We still had corruption. I mean, you're not going to ever stamp out all of corruption. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, every major superpower that has ever existed has had corruption, but the level of it is wherein the issues lay. Now, China has, since the 90s, done a lot to clean up their corruption, and they have managed to be largely successful. And look, I've talked to a lot of people that have traveled to China. I haven't, it's not like any sort of news to me that they've had corruption in the past. I mean, okay, I already knew that. I mean, but here's what's going on through this anti-corruption campaign, or I should say series of anti-corruption campaigns. They're using that as also not only to clean up whatever types of corruption they may have had in the past, but they are also using it as a way to weaponize their financial institutions against the West. And I'm going to explain this. What has happened is that they have targeted small Chinese banks that have very strong ties to Western institutions and investors. And what they've done was that they have basically confiscated the money from these banks. Now, it's not a lot of money in the overall scheme of things. We're talking like an estimated $1.5 billion worth of yuan renminbi. So what people are trying to say, like, it's, oh my God, they're confiscating all the Chinese people's money. That's actually not the case. No, this isn't as widespread as a lot of people would like to think. Is 1.5 billion worth of people's money a lot? Well, yeah, I mean it's a moderate amount. It's not, I wouldn't call it a lot. I mean, China as a whole entire nation state has a $19 trillion economy, okay? They have a $19 trillion economy. So 1.5 billion worth of yuan renminbi that has been confiscated. I'm saying dollars worth of yuan renminbi. that's not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. Is it a moderate amount? Sure. But what they're also doing basically is they're collapsing these banks to consolidate the power of the state over the large financial institutions of China. They want to concentrate the banking power into a small set of financial institutions, large financial institutions, not these little banks. They don't want a bunch of little banks. They're in a phase of power consolidation, okay? Stick with me. They're in a phase of power consolidation. So what they're trying to do is concentrate all the financial power of China into a select few major banks, all right? And there's a reason for it. What they're doing is that they're weaponizing the banks by eliminating these little banks that Western investors have invested into or partnered with, because to destroy those banks craters the Western investments, okay? Stick with me. It craters the Western investment, and it potentially craters a lot of Western financial institutions and hedge funds and all these other things, causing a domino effect, all right? I'm not a financial advisor, but I have enough common sense to know what I see. I mean, China, for instance, has the largest gold reserves on Earth. They're doing a petro-yuan. They are not broke. Anybody saying they're broke is a moron, okay? Anyone making these outlandish claims that they're broke is out of their mind, all right? They're not broke. They've built a crash-proof fortress by accumulating the most gold reserves of any nation state on Earth. So they have the biggest gold reserves of any nation, all right? Russia's the number 2 gold holder. So China and Russia, are the biggest gold holders. And for that, just to keep that in mind at all times helps you know that any of the media spin that you're seeing out there is incorrect. It's patently false, all right? So for them, to have all this gold, it means that they're not broke. What they're doing in confiscating their people's assets is they're cratering these banks. They've frozen these banks and all the assets in them. So doing that reverberates in the West. Now, the Wall Street Journal, for instance, is a Western financial rag. It is like one of the mouthpieces of the Western elites. And for them who normally give a rosy view of the, economic situation in the West, whether it's good or bad, they always try to paint things to be things they're not. For them to even admit that what China's doing to their small banks is actually hurting Western investors, that's like, wow, that's like a wow moment. It's like, wow, they're actually being forced to have to admit something, that's going on, because it's that apparent, that it's hurting the West, that they're being forced to have to admit it. They have to concede to it. And I saw that the other night. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Even Wall Street Journal's admitting that. That's wow. So like I said in the post I made, before other people started mentioning it today, and I shared another video from somebody who I listen to from time to time, who also said, things along similar lines. He is pretty much, for the most part, correct. They are dumping U.S. debt. They've weaponized their banks, and they're doing it to hurt Western investors, hedge funds, and Western financial institutions. Here's another thing. Institutions like HSBC, DB, which is Deutsche Bank, and also the German bank. It's the Germans' bank. Okay, and then you have BlackRock. They all now have CCP officials in some of the highest or most key positions within those institutions. What does that mean? Well, it goes back to what I've told you all about how the CCP is infiltrating and subverting Western corporations and by being on the corporate boards and setting policies that are friendly to the CCP, of course, and also they're doing it with financial institutions. They're literally going into the den of the Western elites and they're stealing their institutions right out from beneath them, okay? They're stealing it from right out from beneath them. And this, they're dictating policies now. And this is called like a hostile takeover, essentially, by the CCP against the West. They're doing this to hurt the West. As I've told you all many, many times, this has nothing to do with anything except for hurting the West. All right? So, the Wall Street Journal, they're admitting that Western investors and institutions are being harmed by the actions of Xi Jinping, and his excuse for this power consolidation, as well as weaponizing these institutions against the West, is that it's part of his anti-corruption campaign. Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't buy that. He's lying. He's obviously lying. He's doing it directly to hurt the West, and that's going to reverberate throughout the West, and it's going to hurt our way of life. It's going to hurt our way of life. They're dumping the debt, the petrodollar. I've told you all in past live streams. I've diligently explained in past live streams some of the more financial aspects of all that they're doing to hurt us. If you want to go back and rewatch those, I suggest you do after this. So basically, they're setting things up to where they can gradually dump the petrodollar. It's not, it might not be, Sandman, like people have talked about. I've even talked about it a long time ago. It might not be Sandman per se. It might just be the setting up for one final dumping, but they've definitely been doing this, okay? They've definitely been doing this. And they're setting us up for their final kill shot. And they're already setting some of the dominoes in motion to collapse our economies. Because again, the whole Western system is essentially a giant Ponzi scheme. And I'm talking about the finances. And remember, the Western economies are market-driven economies. So everything's driven by investment. Everything's driven by, capital and, investment capital. It's driven by that. So when you go after the capital, you're killing the investment, you're killing the investor, and you're killing, the institutions that move the money. Now, this also ties into the CIPS system. China still, for now, is tied into SWIFT, but they're changing systems. They're moving from SWIFT to CIPS. That's their own system. You have the BRICS nations talking about, adopting a new reserve currency. And I see that as becoming the yuan, as China's about to do a petro-yuan deal with Saudi Arabia. They've already got their tentacles into Iran, which is one of their allies. It's also an ally of Russia. And they're getting their tentacles into Saudi Arabia, and they're negotiating a petro-yuan renminbi deal. So they're also going to do a digital yuan, too. So China, there's a lot of moving pieces with all this. That's what I'm trying to explain to everybody. There's a lot of things going on, and I'm trying to explain how they all tie together. There's a lot of things you have to tie together. There's the power consolidation. Then you have how they've weaponized Evergrande's collapse, and they let it collapse on purpose to hurt the West. This was deliberate. There's no doubt in my mind that it's deliberate. You have the Chi-Coms buying up all this property here, which they've already bought up immense amount of properties in the past, since way back when, over 20 years ago, that they're using to stage their troops on, their Trojan horse shock armies, which are their PLA and PAP and other such units, of their forces. So, here, you guys can look at Romero. So, basically, you have all that, and you have the fact that, they're targeting our financial institutions themselves by cratering their smaller banks so that their bigger banks can have, all the more power. They can consolidate their power into central entities. You have to understand, China is it's a despotic police state regime. As I've told you, they're a secular humanist despotic police state regime. So they're all about power centralization and concentration in the hands of a small few. So, you know, keep that in mind at all times. They could care less about smaller banks that are tied in with the West and what happens to them. And obviously, they don't care about their own people that much because they're a secular, humanist, despotic police state regime. So if they're hurting some of their people by freezing their assets, do you really think Xi Jinping gives a rat's ass? No, of course not. When I've told everybody that I think that the Eastern elites are quite possibly even more evil than even the Western elites are, I'm not joking. I'm not joking at all. You know, you have them infiltrating. They're very insidious how they operate. They infiltrate and subvert everything they can. Well, the West, they tried to play nice with the West. Like I said, rival mafia cartels doing business. This is a prime example of this, okay? They tried to play like they were, oh yeah, we're pro-West, we're pro-Western values, so that when the West, who was beguiled into, trying to do joint ventures with the Chi-Coms, only to have it spun around on them, and infiltrated and subverted, beaten at their own game. That's exactly what's happening here. I'm trying to explain it to people. I know people might not get it the first time, but if you watch this from the beginning and listen again, you'll see how big of a deal this is, okay? Right now, here's another thing, Sri Lanka. This is a prime example of what happens to Belt and Road countries. They, due to their collapse of their regime, has defaulted on their Belt and Road projects, such as like the Lotus Tower. If you guys don't know what that is, you can go look it up. It's this tower that was built with Chinese loan money. So when that happened, China is going to go in there and they're going to take their collateral from them. Again, this is another instance of Belt and Road countries and what happens to them too when they don't pay their dues to China, their debts. They get owned. So China is going to be coming in there and they're going to be taking whatever collateral that they, had set forth in their original agreements, and they're going to be installing a pro-China regime in Sri Lanka. You just watch. You just wait and watch. You'll see. China has dominated a lot of the third world through their Belt and Road scheme. People drastically underestimate the cunning and insidious behavior of the CCP, but I think that the CCP is the biggest danger that the rest of the world faces at this time. I think it's more dangerous than anything the Western elites, claim to be doing, or anything that, anybody is claiming to be doing. They're more dangerous than AI. They're more, hell, the CCP has AI. They have some of the most advanced AI on the planet. The CCP does. They're a leader in 5 to the G. They're the real danger. Now, they're the ones that are, controlling a lot of this stuff. They're the ones that have dominated through stealth and cunning much of the rest of the world. I'm namely talking about the third world, and they have their tentacles in the West as well. They're very, very hungry to dominate and control, and they're doing that. You see evidence of it daily. They're doing that. There's no way to refute it. And they are the biggest industrial behemoth that the world's ever seen. My God, you can look at satellite footage of Chinese cities, and you can see these ginormous factory complexes that they're larger than anything that that we have here. I mean, they just are. I mean, you'd have to look at it. I mean, I've seen it before. I mean, it's gargantuan. I mean, they're shipyards. I mean, just everything they have, it's gargantuan. I mean, they're just belching out smoke and just, yeah, man, they don't ever stop producing. They're always producing. I mean, people can say what they want about China, but I mean, as much as I loathe and hate the CCP, I have to give them that. They have really built themselves up into something. I mean, they really are something. I mean, they're ginormous, they're gargantuan, and there's nobody right now, nobody on the face of the earth that can compete with China. I mean, it's just been set up that way. I mean, they're freakishly huge. Now, they're again, they've been consolidating all this financial power into the hands of of a few major key banks that are endorsed and controlled by the CCP directly. They don't want a bunch of small financial institutions, but they're killing two birds with one stone. So, by the excuse that it's part of an anti-corruption campaign, they are using that as their excuse to weaponize these small banks by going after them because they have joint ventures with the West. And, the Western investors that have sunk all this money into those are going to be directly hurt by it, by all that. And, it's going to create a domino effect. So that goes back to what I've been saying since the beginning of the stream. And again, even like I said, even a total junk financial rag like the Wall Street Journal even has to concede to it, which that's really something. If you've ever read any of their stuff, I used to read it when I was younger. I used to read the Wall Street Journal, and man, they try to paint everything like like it's some rosy picture. But yeah, they it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know what to think about it. It's getting to be too much, and the fact that people are only seeing like the surface level stuff, they're not fully aware. I don't think that that okay, so you see some Chi-Com tanks on the street, or you see, that they're taking people's money, but that doesn't mean that they're going broke. I mean, like I said, it's only approximately 1.5 billion worth of assets that were frozen to begin with. But what's more momentous is the fact that these small banks, in and of themselves, are being gone after. Not so much the money that was frozen in them; it's the banks themselves, and it's the Western investors that are tied to them. That's just a symptom of it. Freezing those funds. That's a symptom of it. Tanks on the street is just a heavy-handed, iron-fisted response to it. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's nothing more. It doesn't mean China's broke. Actually, far from it. It means that, China, I mean, 1.5 billion is nothing in the grand scheme of how humongous, gargantuan their economy is. Their economy is 19 trillion, so 1.5 billion is really, it's nothing. I mean, it's a lot to the people that lost it, but it's nothing in the overall grand scheme of things. I mean, sure, it's creating a situation potentially where you're going to have some upset people, and that's why they're doing security theater by sending tanks out there into the streets. So that's all that is. You have people that don't even know what they're even talking about, who haven't dug further into it, saying that, oh, China's going broke. No, they're not. They have the biggest gold reserves on the planet, 6,400 tons of gold. And they have, just they're doing a petro yuan renminbi. It's always a tongue twister. They're doing their they're doing their petro yuan. They're doing a whole bunch of different things. They're gargantuan. They're huge. Their economy continues to grow. It ain't shrinking. And now all this stuff about a potential bumper crop. Well, I don't know the validity of it. I don't know if that's necessarily the case or not. But, I'm inclined, like I said, I'm inclined to believe it, but, they have actually in all reality, stockpiled a gargantuan, humongous chunk of the world's food supplies. So, that means that regardless of whether they've had a bumper crop or not, they still have most of the world's food supply this year. So, it doesn't even matter if that's even true or not. They can get their cheap oil from Russia. They can get whatever they need from Russia in addition to what they've already stockpiled. But it's plain to see that they're ready for war, and that brings me to the next topic. It brings me to the topic insofar as Taiwan and the future invasion of the USA is concerned. Okay, so Taiwan, there's all this big, ruckus, this all gigantic big ado about, politicians, political parasites going over to Taiwan, and that they might not go now, and this and that. Well, they're concerned that they're saying they're concerned that, oh, the Chinese might down their aircraft or whatever, but it's really all just in messaging. It's their messaging that they're trying to say that it's like they're instigating China to do something. Every time that they conduct these types of moves, this type of theater, it's like they're trying to instigate China to do something. And I was watching the Duran earlier, and he was mentioning this, and he was saying something about it's making China very angry as far as the games that they're playing, that the regime in D to the C is playing. They're playing games, and it's angering China. And then but China is also taking the lead position in the world. I mean, they've technologically surpassed us. They've militarily surpassed us, and it's obvious. They've industrially surpassed us a while ago, long ago. That ship sailed in the late 90s. They've surpassed us financially, and they are surpassing us. I mean, they've surpassed us in their gold holdings. We don't even come anywhere near that, and not anymore, and never can now. They surpassed us as far as our petrodollar scheme, because now they're about to do their petro yuan, and OPEC is leaning towards China, which goes with everything I said in the beginning. So what does that mean for Taiwan? Well, it means that, America is thinking like they're going to call China's bluff on Taiwan, but China doesn't bluff. They're not bluffing. They're not bluffing. Sure, they may have bluffed in the past when, times weren't necessarily, the best for them to conduct a cross-channel invasion, but at least since 2020, they've been in a position to where they could easily invade Taiwan. I was surprised when they didn't do it in the fall of 2020. I was very surprised, because that was when all of the world's major militaries were lined up for a world war. That's been going on since fall of 2020. So we know that China's been the world hegemon, the world superpower in real terms and real numbers, real everything, since at least 2017, 2018-ish. And that was the same time. That was the same time that all of these factories that they'd been building since the late 90s and even into the early 2000s that they've been building were largely completed and beginning to crank out even more munitions and vehicles and everything else they needed to conduct a war, other logistics, spare parts, whatever, what have you. That was when most of that had been completed, okay? And they have been set up since then to win any major war that they would have been embroiled in. And even the supercomputers at the Pentagon would agree with everything I just said, because that is about the time when they started to project us losing the war simulations that they conducted with China. Well, when I begun to dig and do more research, I began to find these facts out on my own. Those supercomputers crunch a lot of different factors. Now, that's a supercomputer. I'm just a man, okay? I'm just a man. I'm an amateur researcher and analyst, and all I've ever wanted to do was help people, okay? That's why I'm here. All I've ever wanted to do was help people. I don't even have to do this. I don't even have to be here. And in fact, I'm going to call it quits pretty soon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just do my last project. I'll do intermittent Friday shows, and then I'm just going to call it quits. I'm about done with YouTube. But I have so much material on my page. It'll just be a floater channel where you can, if you ever want to go and reference any of that or use it for your own betterment or preparations mentally, you'll be able to do that. But anyway, that was about the time that, I started to look, and my research and analytical abilities have begun to piece together things that show that, yes, about that time, okay, that was when a lot of their major factory complexes for cranking out additional military hardware had been completed. I'm talking like tank factories, armored vehicle plants where they could crank out armored fighting vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, munitions plants where they could produce additional ammunitions. I'm talking about in addition to what they've already had. China's always been a very industrial nation since at least the 50s. That was when their capabilities in industry really started to begin and then mature over time as they developed as a nation, a modern military power. They weren't a superpower in the 50s, but they were a big power in the 50s, if that makes sense. They didn't receive their superpower status until they knocked us off around 2017, 2018. And that, like I said, that's about the time that a lot of their major factory complexes that they'd begun work on in the 90s were beginning to be completed, to where they began to crank out, even more materiel vehicles in addition to what they've already had as far as capabilities, industrial capabilities. They begun to also clean up their military in the late 90s. It was a process. They always had a powerful military, but they really, really cleaned it up from the late 90s. They began to stamp out all the issues that they had with it. Now they have a newer, reconstituted, very well equipped, ultra modern military force, and it's undeniable. You can look at their parades from like the 90s and look at them now and see the type of hardware that's in their parades, for their CCP anniversary parades. You can look at all the hardware from the 90s to now, and you can see there's a gargantuan difference in what they're showing the world they have versus what they had back then. True enough. Yeah, they were a big power back then, but they've become the world's superpower now. You can see it in just the whole new look that their military has, and that they've had since, at least, the 2016, 2017, 2018 time frame. The 2017, 2018, like I said, was when they became the world's superpower in real terms. But from, I'd say, about 2015, 2016, that was when their military, you really started to notice the differences, all right? And they've had, they've had combat experience insofar as their paramilitary, and I've explained all that. If you want to know more about that, go watch my short Impromtu important live. It's the one with the Russian MiG-41 jet and its stats. If you want to watch that, go right ahead. It'll talk more about some of that. But they really started to change about that time, and you noticed a real serious difference. in their demeanor, in their equipment, in everything. They reorganize themselves. Their PAP, like I was saying, has combat experience from fighting a low-level counterinsurgency in Xinjiang against the Wei to the Gers, and you piece that with the training and their doctrinal changes, and you begin to see this new military come about that learned all the lessons that they learned from their limited incursion in Vietnam in 1979. Also, they're watching our wars in the Middle East and Central Asia. They've learned a little bit. Also, border conflicts with India. I can't forget those. They have had border disputes with India in Kashmir. In Aksai Chin is part of Kashmir. It's like the Chinese part. Kashmir is like divvied up in three ways. It's like divvied up between Pakistan, India, and China. Aksai Chin is the Chinese portion of Kashmir, of that whole region. So they've had their trading of fire and fights and high altitude. I mean, they've learned from that. They've learned from everything they've watched and participated in the past 50 or so years. They've learned from it all. So to deny that is a fool's errand, and it's to be a fool, and to think that the new doctrines they've developed, like they discuss in their manuals or in their books, like the adjutant to PLA colonels, they're adjutants to generals on the general staff of the PLA. There were two adjutant colonels. They wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare. That's a very good read. They go into all of that stuff about Trojan horse doctrines and everything else. And also the insidious nature of total war on your enemy, like fighting your enemy with like whatever you can fight them with, be it like trade warfare, be it economic and financial warfare, like we're seeing with the banks and Evergrande, be it with, like what they're doing with the fent, that certain chemical substance called the fent, which is really like an insidious way of conducting chemical warfare against us. They go into all of that type of stuff. That's all part of the shaping of the battlefield. They are shaping the battlefield. They take a lot from Sun Tzu, but they also develop some of their new modern concepts to pair with that. So if you're looking at their translated manuals, or whether you're looking at a book like Unrestricted Warfare or other things that come from their own mouths, their own minds, you're going to learn a lot about their state of mind, their beliefs, their concepts, their doctrines, everything about them. You really, really should always go to their own mouths for these sorts of things, because I take them very seriously. Their actions match their words, and they do mean what they say because they do it. They do things that back it up. As far as Trojan horse doctrines go, buying our ports, our biggest ports, much like they did in out west with Long Beach and other ports, or just some port terminals, just individual terminals, buying up properties that are strategically placed near installations, or even sometimes right up against them, like some of these solar farms, or other places, cargo yards, and importing their Club Ks, that they also produce Club Ks under license. They build their own. Russia builds them. Russia and China are very close allies anyway. They've done Zapad and other types of exercises together, naval exercises. They're very, very close allies, militarily, economically, financially. So they both, they both produce the Club K. The Chinese, the Chinese are letting the Russians use their CCP regime properties that they've purchased throughout the United States to place their, not just CCP forces, which are the Chinese paramilitary and military forces on, but they also allow their allies to use it. So the Russians obviously are going to be on CCP properties. So would, whoever else, the North Koreans, Pakistanis, Belarusians, whoever. They're all forming a coalition right now. And this entire BRICS thing, I just see that as just them forming some sort of a broad coalition, not just with economics, but potentially militarily too. China is the obvious leader of it all, and Russia would be like, I guess, their closest second, their deputy sort of a leader. I mean, I guess, well, maybe, I mean, I don't know. You could call him a junior partner, but then that might be a little, I don't know, it might be a little too condescending against Russia. Maybe they're about on par as far as like the influence that each other wields, because they both do wield pretty good influence. The only reason I would say that China is the leader, it's not just because they're the superpower, the hegemon in real terms in every category, but also because they have their Belt and Road scheme. That's the only thing that would make me believe that China is the senior partner in that relationship, because even Russia is takes a submissive role to China as far as a Belt and Road partner. They even, like, if you look at the map of the Belt and Road nations, Russia is a Belt and Road signatory. They're a nation that signed on to China's Belt and Road. So I don't know. I mean, you could see that China respects Russia. I mean, but maybe they see each other as peers, or maybe China sees them as the junior. But either way, they're both close allies, so it really doesn't even matter. And they both wield about, pretty close to the same level of influence insofar as the BRICS goes and the coalition that they're putting together. And there's no doubt that they're both going to destroy the West in a third world war. There's nothing the West can do about it. The Western elites are toast too, because the elites of the East see the Western elites as competition, or rivals, rather. I wouldn't say competition at this point, because they basically castrated their own military power, their own economic and financial power. The fact that the Chinese are like infiltrating and taking over their banks. I mean, it's like what was done to Russia in the 90s by the West is what's happening to the West right now by China. Where when the Soviet Union collapsed, you saw a lot of Western elites trying to go just buy up Russia. They tried to buy up everything they could in Russia, pennies on the dollar. Well, China's doing that to a lot of Western institutions and corporations and other aspects of just the whole collective West in general. I mean, China's going in and conducting like a hostile takeover of where they infiltrate, and then they sit on these boards and subvert every Western institution, corporation, and now financial institution that you can think of. And they're using it to benefit the CCP, or to force these institutions to make pro-CCP policies, but policies that hurt their values as a Western institution or a Western entity. They're hurting the West and its values while benefiting the CCP and its values. That's the only thing that can be seen about all this. So, I know I've beaten all these dead horses, but I felt it was very important to discuss these things now more than ever, considering that, when I see certain narratives being put out by, just different people, they're not telling anything other than what they see on the surface, and they're just throwing a dart in the dark, hoping that it sticks, on something, by saying that, oh, well, China did this or that, I guess they're financially collapsing. No. Because you're not looking deeper. You're not looking at the root cause of all of what you're seeing on the surface. No, they're in fact not collapsing. They're in fact maneuvering themselves into a new system, the CIPS messaging system for transactions. They're getting off of SWIFT, but while they're still attached to SWIFT, they're using it to hurt the West by weaponizing their banks and their other financial institutions, like how they let Evergrande, of course, how they let that collapse, and So, I mean, your people are not seeing all that because how can China be broke when they have the biggest gold deposits on Earth? You know, the biggest, or not deposits, but reserves. The biggest gold reserves, the biggest gold holdings. They're doing their petro yuan. They're going over to a digital yuan. They're getting onto SIPs and entirely off of SWIFT, like how Russia got off SWIFT, and now they're doing their FPSF. So or SPFS, I'm sorry. So you see an Eastern system and a Western system emerging because there's two different entirely just separate sets of elites, as I've always maintained, as I've always told you all. And, you see evidence of that now more than ever because you see that although the East and the West, their elites have had business dealings in the past. So do rival mafia families. But rival mafia families, just because they have business dealings, that doesn't mean they don't go to war with each other or plot and scheme against each other behind each other's backs. Absolutely they do. On the peon level, everything looks cut and dry. Like, oh yeah, they're all in bed together. No, that's not true. That's not true at all. They might cooperate on a few things, but they're not all in bed together. No. They cooperate when it's convenient for them. When it's not convenient for them, then hey, they're all about severing ties, just like what's going on right now. Now you're seeing the full fruition of an Eastern and a Western system bifurcating to where, it's setting up for the Third World War, the fall of the West and its elites and its people and as a whole in general. The West is about to be overran by China and Russia. That is why they are the biggest threat. They both lead the world in technology now, and it's painfully apparent. I mean, you look. China's doing a fractional orbital bombardment system. They can, they're making artificial stars. They're just doing so much. They have 5 to the G mastered, and there's no telling what else they're working on. China is a very tight-lipped nation, because again, when you're a despotic police state regime, you have the ability to keep your nation on lockdown, and it's very hard for anybody to do anything because you have the MSS, which is it's like the F to the B to the I and the C to the I to the A. It's like that all rolled into one. That's what the MSS is in China. It's like it's called their Ministry of State Security. That they keep tabs on everything and everybody in China. So yeah, it's very, very difficult, I imagine, for spies to conduct intelligence gathering on the ground inside of China because China's very, very controlled. It's maybe not like North Korea level controlled, but it's pretty damn controlled. It's up there with them. So yeah, you have a lot of these things occurring, and it's painfully apparent that these things are happening. And Taiwan, it'll fall very quick, very easy, very hard because they've got Trojans in Taiwan, just like they do in the rest of the collective West. But Taiwan, it would be especially easy considering the proximity to China, as well as the fact that Taiwanese are ethnic Chinese. I mean, it's not hard to base Trojan armies inside of Taiwan at all. It's already easy in the West. I mean, it's really easy in the United States. But imagine how much easier it would be in Taiwan. And here's the other thing about Taiwan. There's no way, beyond their military, their puny, tiny military, there's really no way they could effectively resist because, if China comes on full force, it's not like the Taiwanese people could conduct any sort of like effective guerrilla campaign. I mean, they're not armed. They don't have a tradition of being trained in with firearms. It's not like they would have like the manpower that was effective and armed that would be able to repulse such a occupation, much less the invasion. Even in the United States, as well armed as we are, yeah, I mean, sure. In the internal conflict scenario that I created, that's great if you're fighting like the woke military, I mean, but if it comes down to like China, who has this gargantuan, humongous behemoth of a military and paramilitary, plus all their allies and all the different equipment they have and combined arms forces working hand in hand. I mean, yeah, if you're fighting a depleted, weakened military, that's fine for that. But if you're fighting like China, no, you're not. No, I don't care how many guerrilla forces you have. They're not gonna. The attrition rate is going to be horrible. When our military was professional, there was a horrible attrition rate on the Iraqis and Afghanis who tried to fight back against us toe to toe. And we really showed them. I mean, you're not gonna fight that effectively against combined arms forces, and they didn't fight that well against us. And that was when we were a professional force, not like right now, like where we're depleted, where our troops don't, where they're just utterly demoralized due to all the piss poor policies and woke garbage and everything else. They're not even a shadow of what they were like when I was in the army. I mean, it's right now it's an utter embarrassment. They're purging their best forces. Much of them have taken that certain poison in their arm. So then you got that to even consider. You've got the ones that didn't. They're about to get axed. They're about to get kicked out, purged. They're talking what 260,000 now. My God, man! Like there's not going to be nothing left. There's not going to be nothing left. You see, and here's the other thing. About the hype stuff. Case in point. Case in point for what I've always told you all. What they do is they make a few examples in a few different places, and they hope that it scares everybody else and that it gets reported as a fear and agitation propaganda. Well, look what occurred in Delaware. They sent some goon squad to some dude's house, and now everybody's freaking out about it. It's like, my God, man, like they can't do that everywhere. What they try to do is they try to make an example or maybe a few, and then they hope that it goes on down the line and scares everybody. But that's just a BS story. I think it's a joke. I don't even pay attention to it. It's like this whole thing with, which puppet, they're going to put they're going to put this bimbo in now. And it's like, look, it doesn't matter what kind of bimbo or whoever you put in as a puppet. They're still a puppet and they have no power. They're taking orders from the Western satanic elites, even though their days are numbered themselves, because the Eastern elites are going to overtake them. So there's really bigger things afoot than which puppet they they install in a basically a dying nation that has like no chance, when the Third World War foreign invasion occurs. So who cares what bimbo or whoever they put into a position like that? They're all puppets. They're all puppets. It's a joke, and none of that even matters. Who cares? I mean, this place has been going down the tubes. So at this point, it shouldn't even surprise anybody if they put someone even worse in there. At this point, I mean, it's all just the same. I mean, it would have gone the same way had this guy stayed. Because it's the people behind them that are controlling everything. It's not them. They're just an empty suit. Literally, they're just an empty suit. So, and then there's the whole issue. Do you all recall when I told y'all that when my prediction was that Ukraine would collapse, well, that looks like that could be on the eve of happening. I was watching Johnny Don't Speak, and he's good in my book. He's a good dude. He's cool in my book. I was watching him, and he was talking about how allegedly they threatened Z. You know who Z is? They threatened Z, the guy that runs Ukraine, and they said that if he loses Slavyansk, then no more Western funding, no more anything from the West. Well, you know what would happen if that happened? Z would abdicate, and he would run off to one of his mansions he has in one of these other countries, and the whole Ukraine government would collapse virtually overnight, and Russia would claim victory. Well, I told you they would collapse at some point. You know, that could be it. That could be it. Well, Russia's on the verge of taking Slavyansk. I don't see how the Ukrainians are going to stop that from happening. So yeah, and that would even still put it within the July time frame because it's still July. And August even would still be within a decent margin of error. So even if it happened at the beginning of August, hey, it still would fall between that margin of error to where I was still pretty damn accurate. So yeah, but if it happens even before the end of July, then yeah, you could see that. You would see Ukraine virtually collapse overnight. Or hell, even a coup could still happen. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, but everything I've told you about that whole situation, it appears to be coming to pass. It appears to be coming to pass. Then there's the whole food and fuel collapse with us. You see evidence of that every single day, every single solitary day. Then there's this drought, which, it could be weather warfare, might not be, but, if it is, it's hard to tell if the Chinese, the Russians, or if our own, Western elites aren't doing it to us, because remember, the Western elites want to destroy their own power base so that they think that they're going to rebuild something in its place, but they don't have any viable replacement for it. They have no viable system as a go-between to get them to where they think that they're trying to go, which is totally asinine to begin with, but hey, that's their, crack pipe induced, plans. It doesn't even make any sense. Whereas the East has plans to colonize us, which does make sense because they're after the resources. They're after the food production. And by God, they're going to get it too. There's nothing that can be done to stop China and Russia. Nothing from achieving their aims, and they're going to achieve it. They're going to achieve it. So basically, I just wanted to, thank everybody for coming tonight. And I've been going for about an hour or so. My phone battery is really, really low, and I have to stop or else it's going to cut me off, so I have to get off here. It wasn't fully charged when I began, so it's about to die on me for real. I gotta go. Y'all be blessed, and I wanted to thank each and every one of y'all for coming. Here's Romero real quick. That's the boss cat. All right, man. Y'all be blessed. Thank you, everybody.